see it? Yes. So I was asked to give an introduction to the subject, sustainable procurement of food, and I gave it a title from certification to footprinting, because I think that's a trend in procurement in the latest years. And during my presentation, I will tell a little bit more why this is happening and how it is happening. Yes. So first of all, I will go a little bit more in detail of the potential of retailers and other organizations like wholesalers and catering organizations at the end of the supply chain in making food chains more sustainable. Then a bit about the differences between the traditional certifications and footprinting on organizational level and product level, and as a last part, a bit about government policies around eco-labeling and footprinting. First, about the potential of retailers. Here you can see a bit of a simplified version of a supply chain, where there are millions of farmers on the left side and millions or billions of consumers on the right side. And in between, there are all different steps in the supply chain with all kinds of related sustainability issues. And retailers are in the middle of that. And in a lot of cases, there's a lot of concentration. And retailers can have an influence on how sustainable products are produced, but also how sustainable products are consumed. If you look at the supplier side, they can ask for sustainability information. They can also have demands to the producers on how sustainable it should be produced. They can give incentives, higher prices, other type of incentives. They can select the most sustainable suppliers that can supply the products, but also support suppliers, for example, farmers in making their products more sustainable. On the consumer side, they can be transparent about the sustainability of products, so consumers can take it into account. They can stimulate in all different ways a sustainable choice, using the 4 Ps, for example, the price, promotion, place. And in some cases, they also only make sustainable products available. For example, the only bananas or coffee that you can buy are the certified ones. Now, traditionally, the main way to make the products more sustainable, to make the procurement more sustainable, was certification. And certification, the traditional certification, has a lot of advantages. It guarantees a minimum level of sustainability, simple communication to consumers. In nearly all cases, there is some kind of verification. And it's also quite simple data exchange. You just have to know if a product is certified or not. In comparison with impact or footprinting indicators, like greenhouse gas emission, water use, those type of things, it also has some disadvantages. So in most cases, certifications are based on process type of indicators. You have to do this or you should do that, but not so much on the result of it, so the impact. And in most cases, it's prescribed what you should do instead of looking at the final results, like with footprinting. There's limited incentive for continuous improvement. So if you measure greenhouse gas emission, every kilogram of CO2 less is a better score. So then there is an incentive. With certification, if you have the certification, there's no incentive to do more. Now, another advantage of footprinting is that you can aggregate it in all kinds of ways. So it's a quantitative number. You can add it up. You can calculate the impact of a product, of an organization, of a product line. A disadvantage of certification might be that there is a limited coverage of products and themes. So not all sustainability themes might cover. Not for all products are good certifications available. And like you all know, the proliferation that there might be many labels that might confuse both producers and consumers. So that's one reason why there's a shift to footprinting. Another more external reason, external demand for retailers are the following ones. So companies in the end can only be sustainable in a sustainable world. So it means that we should be sure that companies do their fair share of making food supply chains more sustainable, and that they do enough so that in the end we have sustainable supply chains. So they should meet thresholds. Yeah, the most famous example is the Paris Agreement, where we agreed about halving the CO2 emissions in 2030 and even more in later stage. And yeah, this way you can easily measure if companies do their fair share in finally reaching environmental goals, which is not possible with certifications or other type of sustainability communication. Now, the last advantage of footprinting is that you can make all kind of absolute impact comparison. So, for example, compare one product category with the other product category, or one industry with the other industry, or one company with the other company, because in the end you can add it up to a total number. Now, the most common method used for footprinting is life cycle assessment. And with life cycle assessment, you look at the full life cycle of a product, from the early stage of the mining of minerals, for example, until the packaging that is thrown away by the consumer or recycled. And in all those steps of the life cycle, you look what is happening with the environment. So what kind of resources are used and what kind of emissions are made to the environment. Now you can add it all up, and if you do weighting of sustainability themes, you can come to a total score. Now, then a bit about footprinting of organizations, and I just added the most important ones in this slide. Now, first of all, the Carbon Disclosure Project that is already there for quite some time. Originally, it was only reporting on carbon, but currently also water and deforestation. The Science Based Target Initiative goes one step further. It's not only measurement, but it's also target setting. And it also checks if your target meets the thresholds of the Paris agreements. And they also develop methodologies, and recently they also launched a new methodology specific for the land-based sectors. Then the last part of footprinting of an organization is not a voluntary one. So the first one are voluntary, it's mandatory. You will all be aware of the Corporate Sustainable Reporting Directive, where the 50,000 largest companies are asked to report on a very broad set of indicators, but also scope 3 greenhouse gas emission indicators. And that's quite challenging for retailers with thousands of products. One issue with that is that it's still a lot of freedom to how to calculate these type of indicators, and therefore comparability is also still a bit of an issue. And what you see happening in the last months even is that retailers are joining together to see how they can solve this challenge. So both in the Netherlands and the UK, several retailers joined collective projects. And then food products, the main method there is the product environmental footprint, so developed by the European Commission, that defines how you measure impact on 16 different environmental impact indicators, and also states how you should weight it to a single score. The Commission already started about 15 years with the product environmental footprint, but still there are some issues that need to be addressed. So the standard is only available for a limited number of products. There is only comparison possible within a product category, and it's a quite complicated methodology. So therefore, a high cost, and there are still limited tools and implementation. As a response to that, in the latest years, eco-labeling initiatives started, or product level footprinting initiatives. And here you can see a lot of those examples. And what those initiatives do is that they want to develop a kind of Nutri-score for the environment. So you have the Nutri-score for the healthiness of products, and in this case, it tells about the impact on the environment of all food. So it gives all food a score based on that life cycle assessment. Methods start with product category average databases. so that companies only have to indicate how they are different from the product category averages, and that also lowers the administrative burden. Well, the first of the initiatives were all started in France, based on the product environmental footprint and using a French database. The later private labels also developed their own methodologies, so choose other methods than the product environmental footprint, and also develop private, not publicly available databases. This is quite a good method to get a first indication for your scope 3 reporting, for example, but most of the current methods still have limited recognition of sustainable practices of farmers, for example. Now, Wageningen started activities also in eco-labeling in the Netherlands. I'm chairing a group that is developing an eco-label for the Netherlands on behalf of the Dutch government, but we also participate in the Eco Food Choice project, where on European level we try to develop a European standard together with the French government, for example. France is most advanced in this, and they will launch a French government eco-label for all food in France this year. Now, last subject, a slide about what the European Union is doing in this domain. Two things are mainly relevant. The Green Claims Initiative, that first proposal was launched in March, and recently the Parliament has approved a first version with criteria on voluntary environmental claims. And one of the things that is stated there, that those claims should be based on life cycle assessment, but it also states that for food, the product environmental footprint is not yet inclusive enough. Another one that was announced but is not yet launched is the Sustainable Food Labeling Framework, where a framework would be developed for not only environmental information communication, but also nutrition, social, and animal welfare. My last slide with the conclusion. Food printing is introduced both by the private and the public sector. There's a great potential in my opinion, but still quite a big lack of data, so still a lot of things to improve. Also, the methodologies are still in development, especially on company level, and there's a lack of alignment between the methodologies on product and company level. With most of the private initiatives and also the public initiatives, there is still a lack of recognition of sustainable practices, so there has to be improvement there. And there is a strong focus on greenhouse gas emission and limited activity in the other domain, mainly by the pressure of the CSRD, where the scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions should be. So that was my last slide. Back to you, Art.
Thank you very much, Koen. If you have any questions, you can ask them after all the presentations. So I would like to give the floor to Els Pedert.
Thank you very much, Albert. We tested this, it worked. I hope it can work again, that you can see my screen.
Yes, you can.
My presentation, yes. Okay. So good afternoon. My name is Els Pedert. I'm from Eurocommerce. I'm Director of Product Policy and Sustainability. I'm going to take you through a few sort of really top-level developments that we see in Eurocommerce. And I think you will also note that this is very much also in line also with what Koen has said, and probably what also will follow in the later steps in the webinar today, which is, I think, good, because then we have the same view. A few words on Eurocommerce. So we are the European Association for Retail and Wholesale. We cover we have members in 27 European countries and all the trade associations, and we also have sort of the main retail and wholesale companies in Europe as our members. So they are our experts. They feed us with the knowledge, and we feed them with the information about what's happening at European level. I think some of them some of our members might be here online, which would be good, because then they can correct me later on if necessary. So yeah, I mean, we cover both food and non-food, so all the whole retail and wholesale activities, not only food. So Eurocommerce, of course, we have a very big role in advocacy and intelligence sharing, but we are also investing more and more in thought leadership. And one of the points that we did, one of the reports that we did was on the transformation that the sector has to go through. And I think we are all aware of this, and this is also the reason for this webinar. And we calculated how much it needed to be invested by the sector on 3 big fields: the sustainability, digitalization, and skills. So coming to quite a big number of 600 billion by 2030. What is important, I think, for us here is that it really sort of, we talked a lot about sustainability, and what, of course, it became clear is that it really depends a lot about production practices. So I think we need to be clear that maybe on the retail end, there are investments to be made, but the main investments will have to be done in the life cycle up to the retail environment. And what it also became clear in this study is that it's all about collaboration. This is not what you can do alone. If you are a large or a small player, it doesn't matter. You really need to work with your suppliers to make a change, and with your probably with the sector as a whole. It also clearly showed, indeed, and following on from Koen, we need harmonized standards. There's a lack of standards, a lack of methodologies. And with that also, we need more data transparency and traceability really to move forward on this, and to really sort of to come together and have really defined the direction we collectively go to. You can find this report on our website in case you're interested. The gaps that were in this report, we also identified, of course, there are issues with competition issues. How far can you work together really on sustainability agreements? And also, of course, who is going to fund all this transition? The part is maybe everybody has to play their role, but most of the real investments are going to be in the beginning of the chain. We also publish a yearly State of Grocery report. Also there, we're having a new one coming out next month, so I invite you to take a look. Just this report, again, confirmed the importance of sustainability. It has a consumer survey, but also CEO interviews. So clearly confirmation by the CEOs, by the businesses, we need to really work on sustainability, no doubt about it. But of course, we had a very big crisis again, and I suppose we're still in a crisis where consumers maybe lose interest a bit and have become more price sensitive. But of course, what we've also seen is that it is, I mean, scope 1 and 2 is more or less under control. We know what needs to be done. It's more clearly, but the big challenge and what we all collectively need to learn and work on is the scope 3 emissions. And this is really top of mind for everybody and for all our members. Also, this report, if you go to our website, you can take a closer look. Some general messages, because we talk about the topic, of course, a lot about, especially in the European Union, when we were preparing for a proposal on the framework for sustainable food systems. It already became clear, as I said, we do need a methodology that can be applied by all actors throughout the chain. It needs to be science-based, real bottom line issues, bottom line messages that we have to keep on repeating. But also, and that was also mentioned by Koen, is there are many, if you talk about sustainability, it's more than just carbon. There are many other aspects included, and it makes it very complex to measure, and also very complex to source, and complex to communicate to the consumer. But we need something, and we need something soon. We can't really wait for much longer. It's rather, let's start, let's improve together, and just go on the journey and try to really come together as much as possible. But at the same time, the positive issue is that we do have a lot of voluntary initiatives already, and so there's quite a bit of knowledge all around. Let's just bring that together. Just on the so we as a sector, of course, are very committed, and I think one of the examples of this is that we actually signed up for the Race to Zero retail pledge, where associations were actually invited to sign up. And in signing up, they sort of committed to really help their members to actually advance on the road to zero, and also signing up to these science-based initiative targets, and really sort of really bring to the public the strong commitment of the sector and how we all want to be part of this journey. So this is, I think, also gave us a new push, and we really sort of brought together also our members in Eurocommerce, and something that we really have to make sure that we can access the right knowledge, that we can learn from each other as a business, and that we can give as much guidance as possible, and also explain to our other sectors, our other stakeholders, what we actually are doing. So this is still something that is ongoing. So one of our other members is APED. They are one of the other associations that actually signed up for the Race to Zero. They have really established a roadmap with their members. And again, this is, I think, a good example about what I mentioned before. It's all about cooperation, collaboration, learning together, moving forward together, and getting the support from your associations and even from your peers in doing so. So I think this is an excellent example how an association can, in itself, move this forward. We also, of course, got a very interesting example from the British Retail Consortium, so the Retail Association in the UK. Used to be a very long-standing, excellent member, but because of Brexit, unfortunately, we have our own priorities. And they have set up a Mondra coalition, as they say. I think what is very important here is also about really getting the data and sharing the data quality, data transmission. But I think what is very important in this story is that there is really a Data Transparency Act from DEFRA, which really sort of supports the need and underpins the need that we do need to make as much data available for this sustainability transition. So I think it's building on that. And in this coalition, there is DEFRA, so the authorities are present. So they have these steering groups, technical alignment groups, but it's an excellent example how to come together, come to these common methodologies, and really make sure that the data is of the right quality that is expected, and sort of equally harmonized, and have some standards there as well. So this is quite exciting, I think, as well, what we will be expecting going forward in this field. Of course, in Europe, there's there are more initiatives. I think that just shows that this is a really hot topic, and everybody's realizing that we need to come together and really harmonize and combine our efforts. And this is another initiative which is called the European Sustainable Food Coalition, which I understand is going to be formally launched in April, but also has the same has the same intention to really come together, get this data out there, preferably primary, and really bring in more and more partners from the farmer to the retailer on this same path. I have another, so it's not only about big corporations, there's also very important small local corporations. And here as an example from Sonai, this Continental Producers Club, really where they work with an NGO, which is also often a very good partnership, to really sort of work with their local producers to really sort of see how you can reduce the carbon emissions. So this is much more local, but it, of course, gives a lot of value to your local supply chains, and of course also helps towards your consumers to show that you are valuing your local farming environment and your producers. A big retailer, of course, is Carrefour. They have, for example, they've got a long-standing Actual Food, which is also got a very important climate angle. They also signed up to the Code of Conduct, like 12 of our other members. And I think they have a big program also, sort of this 20 megaton project, where they really engage with their suppliers and decide with 100 of their suppliers to actually in a certain reduction target. And really ask for the commitments to really also move forward in this Scope 3 emissions and in their own climate strategy. I think I'm going to be stopped. This is my last slide. So just as a conclusion, I mean, what do we need? I mean, it's clear. We've also heard it from Koen. I think I can only confirm that it is all about cooperation. We really need to come together, be more efficient, get the right methodologies out there. That actually can be applied by everybody, and that everybody feels incentivized to actually join this work. And of course, with that comes very important needs for data access, databases, data quality, and clear rules and criteria on the sharing as well. I think this summarizes a little bit. I'm happy to take questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Els, for that. Then it's time to give the floor to Julian.
Yes, I think my screen is being shared, and I hope you can also hear me.
Yes.
For the next couple of minutes, I will try to take you a bit through a more of a practical example from Jumbo. So the work that we've been doing on specifically science-based target setting, and also the challenge that we've faced or are still facing throughout that journey, basically. Because yeah, I've been doing this for quite some time, and I'm also learning every day. So I think it's interesting to also share those insights with you. Yeah, my name is Julian Marcus. I work as a sustainability advisor for Jumbo for 1.5 years now. So the journey around science-based target setting for Jumbo started a bit before I joined. So in the first quarter of 2022, when we committed ourselves to the Science-Based Target Initiative. And that's when I also came in and was being asked to start calculating our carbon emissions. First, we did that on a spend-based. So we tried to multiply our euro spent or euro sold on, for example, meat and dairy times an emission factor that's available in the public space. But I think what you also seen from the previous two presentations, developments are going quite quickly. So while we were doing this, also the flag standards were being drafted or being completed by the Science-Based Target Initiative and the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. So when we finished our calculations around Q1 of last year, new standards were out, and we had to adjust those calculations to calculations based on kilograms of products sold. We managed to do that, and we submitted our targets, and right now we're right in the middle of the validation of our science-based targets. So not too many insights on that yet, because we're still waiting for them to ask us questions. But it's been quite a road. I think this is also a confirmation from the slide that Els already showed, is that scope 3 is by far the biggest scope for a retailer and for most companies. So out of all our carbon emissions or greenhouse gases, more than 93% comes from scope 3. So that's where also the challenge lies, or scope 3.1 specifically. So the purchased goods and services of Jumbo, which mainly involves around the products that we sell in our shelves. So logically, that's also where the challenge lies for us. Quickly, to give you a very brief explanation of how the calculations work that we did right now, because I hope you can imagine that Jumbo sells a lot of different types of products, so around 30,000 different products. So starting with asking every supplier what the carbon emission of our product is not the way to go. That's just too time intensive, and also not all suppliers know what their carbon emissions are yet. So that's why we started with an analysis basically on the kilograms of products sold times an emission factor that is available in the public. We use different databases for that. Some of them for free, some of them are purchased. So for example, AgriBelize, AgriFootprint, or EcoInvent. And this is just an example calculation. The figures are of course not real, but just to exemplify how that works. So we sold courgettes or zucchinis in English. We sold meat, and we have an average emission factor for that type of meat or that type of vegetable, which gives us a rough estimate of the product group and the carbon emissions that are emitted for that product group. Well, of course, it has some advantages. It's not that time intensive. It gives us first insights in the hotspots of our carbon emissions. We don't need data from suppliers yet. And when we do contribute to the shift from meat to plant-based proteins, we are able to measure that shift, because of course we sell less meat and we sell more vegetables, for example, or beans. So that we are able to calculate right now based on our existing methodology. However, this is of course just a starting point. This doesn't give us any specific insights in Jumbo suppliers and the products. So if a supplier is already doing better than the market, or during our relationship with the supplier, that supplier improves its supply chain and emits less CO2 emissions, then with this methodology, we're not able to measure that. So yeah, of course, we need to think about a way how to overcome that. Well, as Els also said, and I think Koen also gave some examples, we don't think that we can solve that challenge alone. So that's why we joined the Climate Impact Consortium, which is being led by Impact Buying, and the parties on the left side of my screen are also joining that consortium. And really the goal is to, well, in the end, get to product carbon footprints for all of our products in a smart way that we can basically enhance based on materiality. So the biggest products first, and then the smaller product groups based on the carbon emissions later. And get those insights to really steer upon carbon reduction and know that when something is being done in the supply chain, that we can also measure that in this product carbon footprint. And of course, what we also find very important is that we know that the administrative burden of suppliers is increasing quite heavily. So we also want to make sure that we don't come up with a new software system only for Jumbo, where suppliers need to fill in new data. But of course, if they need to do it for us and they also supply to other retailers, then it works best if they use the same software system so that they don't need to do the same work over and over again. Because in the end, we want to spend our time on decarbonizing our supply chains and not on the administration of it. This comes, of course, with a couple of challenges. First of all, if we choose a new software system, I will show one example later. We need to make sure that, or at least try to build on existing sector initiatives. Of course, some sectors are already a bit further with measuring their carbon footprint. And it would be a shame if we come up with a new methodology, basically, that replaces their methodology. So we really need to think about a way how to integrate that into, basically the methodology that we are creating, or at least the methodology that we are looking at. These are challenges that we haven't solved yet. So if there are any of these in the group, then of course, I'm very happy to hear that. But that's, of course, what we're thinking about. We also need to get insights from both private label and A brands. They tend to use different systems at this very moment to deliver data to us. So we also need to think about a way how to basically connect those systems to each other. And also looking at the future, we also need to make sure that we don't stay in our carbon tunnel, but we also need to broaden that view towards other indicators. So for example, water, biodiversity in the future. So the tooling also needs to be suitable for that. To give you a very concrete example of how we think about how that should look like. So this is just also an example. It's not a real supply chain of Jumbo, but it's one of the pilots that we're doing is with a product carbon footprint provider that's called Carbon Cloud. And they basically are able to map a supply chain like this based on the ingredients that we provided them with. Of course, for chickpeas, it's very easy because the ingredients of chickpeas is chickpeas. But if you have processed goods, then of course there are a lot of ingredients. This is basically a supply chain that can be mapped based on that general information. And the goal then is, of course, to let suppliers enhance that information later on. So does it work? Yeah, it works. For example, one of our suppliers is processing the chickpeas in their factory. We estimated based on average data that's available in the market that they use a certain amount of kilowatt hours of electricity for that product. But maybe we have a very sustainable supplier or a not so sustainable supplier, and they know it's not 0.3 kilowatt hours of electricity, it's 0.1, and we purchase green electricity and not gray electricity. So by doing this with our suppliers, we are hopefully able to basically increase the data quality in our supply chain and get a better and better understanding of how our supply chains work. I don't have a conclusion slide, so this was basically my last slide, but I think I've tried to really take you through the steps that we're currently taking. Still a lot of challenges on the way. We're still learning every day, but we think that by doing this together, we're doing the right thing for the Dutch market and really hopefully set up a system and a software that will be still be used in the next 10, 20 years. So thanks. Happy to take questions after Willem also did his story, and I'm giving it back to Allard.
Thank you very much, Julian. Well, you already mentioned it. It's time for our final speaker. Willem, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So should now be visible. So after this very nice example of Julian and in the Netherlands, and also the overview from a retail perspective from Els, and the general overview of Koen, another example, scope 3 example. It's called thesis. I think for different reasons, I think it's interesting to show it here in this webinar. Not only because Wageningen is involved, I think we are for a long time involved in this, but we are involved in many different initiatives. But why this is involved, I think because it's already operating in about 15 years. It was never labeled as a scope 3 tool. I think in the past we named it, well, it was all about covering supply chain impact and how to measure that, especially from between retail and supplier dimension, but covering the full supply chain. But well, as everyone is talking now about scope 3, in essence, it's also a scope 3 tool. So let me give you a clear overview and also see, well, there's some overlap with the example of Julian, but also very clear differences, because it's not only about carbon, but all kind of environmental and social things. So first of all, it's a performance assessment system developed by the Sustainability Consortium. And basically you can see the Sustainability Consortium as a large collaboration between both the private sector and science. And science in this sense is the Arizona State University in the US and the Wageningen University Research in Europe, as a membership organization with many companies, but also some non-profits member. Basically, in essence, it's guiding retailers, but not only retailers, also wholesalers, food service companies, and their supplier to both benchmark, quantify, but also take action. So it's not only about taking stock, but also it's really a focus on improvement on, let's say, all material sustainability issues in consumer product suppliers, supply chains. Currently, there are 12 retailers actively using it. They have implemented thesis, so you can see the names here. Many of them in North America, but also one in the UK. There are many suppliers reporting on these systems. So last year was about at least 1,500. It varies a bit every year, somewhere between 1,500, 2,000, sometimes a bit more, a bit less. And it is efficiently operating at a platform of a software company, which is called SupplyShift, and quite recently was acquired by Sphera. So that is high level, but very specifically, how does it work? Well, there's a major focus, well, also on organization level, but mainly on the product level, because we think that there you will see the clear differences. You saw it already in the presentation, also of Julian for Jumbo, but also here. This is how it looks like. This is an example of coffee. So basically we have a couple of clear steps. Basically first to identify how does the generic supply chain look like, in this case for product category coffee. And then where are the hotspots? We do that based on literature review, some stakeholder interactions, and go through a couple of steps. And then we have the generic supply chain and the hotspots. Based on these hotspots, we define KPIs. So this is just one example of a KPI. So in every product supply chain, there are either 10, 15, 20 hotspots, and linked to these hotspots, there are we define KPIs and related questions. So this is just one example that is very much at the beginning of the value chain of at the farm level. It's about irrigation water use, and you have then a couple of other ones. But this one, you can see it already immediately very much focused on something you can influence. So basically, we don't only have this for coffee, but we have this for 115 food and non-food product categories. So basically everything you can see in a typical retail store. So, well, again, Julian mentioned, I think, more than 30,000 or even more different products. Well, you see that at all these retail, but also food service companies. There's so many different product categories. and ingredients behind this and specific supply chain. So therefore, we feel it's very important to have these product-specific KPI sets related to their hotspots. But what is different, I think, from the other example, it's not only about carbon, but it's all about all kind of environmental topics, but also social topics. Well, if you look to the introduction slides of Koen, it was a lot about environmental impact, but also if you look at CSRD, there's also a lot of mentioning about social impacts. So I think thesis and the Sustainability Consortium collaboration is also always has been an attempt to capture all material, social, and environmental topics. But it really depends also on what is feasible. So in some cases, we really would like to talk about impact, but it's quite difficult. So therefore, we choose for feasibility reasons more practice-based indicators. So for instance, if it's about child labor use or abuse, but when possible, and then we can choose also more impact-based indicators like GHG emissions. Well, these KPIs, they all have a scope-free perspective. That's of course the key term that we have to use, of course, now. But that's both from a retailer, but also from a supplier perspective. So if you look then specifically, so what kind of, well, in general, the coverage that we have from thesis. So well, there's a focus on product level, but for some so important topics like greenhouse gases, but there's more in development. We have also a couple of questions on organization level. So this is, and we do that very much in alignment with, well, having KPIs that are very much aligned with leading initiatives or align it with general KPIs that are already in that direction. So on the one hand, we have goals at KPIs related to goals at an organizational level. So you see a couple of examples here. So what's your scope-free emission intensity target? Is it in accordance with the Science-Based Targets Initiative and so on? And then also specifically, in addition to the goals, also at an organization level, we ask information specifically about emissions. So that is basically at the organizational level, and what later this year will also be implemented some specific organizational level KPIs focused on circularity and nature, and more to come, what we expect in the coming years. Secondly, in terms of coverage, it's at product level. So what I said, there's a lot of differences between different products. So it's good to know, have the overview on greenhouse gas emissions, for instance, at the organization level, but especially also at the product level related to the hotspots. We have specific scope-free kind of KPIs. So on the left-hand side, you see several examples, and I won't discuss them one-on-one, but just to give you a bit of insight what we are covering. KPIs at product level that are scope-free, that we basically cover at almost all product categories. So it's about greenhouse gas emissions. It's about pesticide application, water use, etc., but also a couple of social ones. And well, basically what you see on the one hand, we ask for information about greenhouse gas emissions, but we also ask related information, for instance, about yields or others that we know that has a large influence, like fertilizer use or pesticide use, also a large influence on impacts like greenhouse gas emissions or biodiversity. Then on the right-hand side, you see a couple of examples very specifically on animal-based food products. We know for some aspects and impacts they have, they score very high. Of course, if it's about climate or biodiversity, but also in terms of animal welfare, that's also very important. So you see a couple of very specific animal-based ones here. So just to give you a very quick overview, also with a view on the time, I don't have time to go very much in detail, but we just wanted to present this as an example about if you look at all the legislative developments per country at the European level, but also, of course, outside Europe. It's not only about carbon, there's a lot more. And this is one example. And I think it includes a couple of key attributes or advantages because I think it covers both social and environmental, and that's more and more being asked, a complete overview. And then both at the organization, but also at the product level where you can make the difference and, well, can start, differentiating yourself in terms of sustainability. It's already long in use. More than 15 years, both by retailers and suppliers. And I think also the independent identification of both the hotspots and, well, let's say the science-based development of KPIs. Of course, also here there are areas for improvement, and I think especially the integration of, let's say, footprint information or secondary footprint information, so that you have even a better starting point before you're starting to collect information on our system or on this system from suppliers and suppliers of suppliers. It's all, well, we see it as extremely handy to have already a basis that you can use or you can connect with this kind of information. And also on the methodology side, there are always improvement areas, more detailed methods for specific footprint indicators, for instance, but that's also on the social side. So there's always areas for improvement. But just to present you and give you an example about, well, what kind of more broader tools that are existing that seems to align well with upcoming legislation. So thank you. Over to you again, Allard, and looking forward to the questions and discussion.
Thank you very much, Willem. All right, then we went through all the presentations. Once again, thank you for these presentations, Julian, Els, Koen, and Willem. Then a lot of questions have been asked in the chat already, but I suggest we will give you the opportunity to ask questions live here among the audience. So if anybody has a question, please raise your hand that you can pick in the Teams tool. And otherwise, if no questions are asked, we are gonna take a look at the chat instead. Don't see any questions popping up, so we go to the chat instead, see if there are some interesting questions there. Els, a question asked by Nuno. Are all of your members available to disclose their private databases with standards for data quality and sharing? Could give a quick response to that question.
Thank you. This is a good question. I think I will ask them. I think in the end, I think what is also the big trend what we are going to is how far shall sustainability become a pre-competitive issue? I think this is probably the next step, as it is the case for food safety. How far each individual is available for now, I do not know. Of course, it all starts also with having the right methodology to measure, because there's no need to open up a database if the underlying methodology is maybe quite different from the rest. But I will take that with me, because this is not an ongoing discussion, and let's see where we end. Thank you.
Yeah, if I can add shortly,
Yes.
So that currently there's a bit of a difference between the private and the public initiatives. So in the public initiatives, the databases are publicly available, and everybody who's interested can go into it and look at the details. We have most of the private standards, those databases are not publicly available. So it's harder to find the exact numbers that are behind a particular calculation.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we have another question asked by Koen de Koning. By Carlos. And this one is for Willem. Is thesis approved by SBTi? And do you need to verify the information coming from suppliers to the practices utilized? So that's almost the second last question in the chat.
Yeah, thanks. So good question. So do you need to verify the? So well, there's an ongoing debate. Let's start with the last part. So ongoing debate about, well, verification. So I think at least if suppliers provide information, I think there's from their accountant also a kind of a signature, and also from themselves once this information is being provided to the system. It's not the case that it's all being checked. I think that's, well, more and more becoming important, that all the information in this system should be validated and verified. But for now, it seems to be too much of a burden yet to put that on the system. But I think that should be something that should be integrated step by step, and we are in continuous discussion and conversation how to do that also internally with external parties. Is thesis
maybe one
approved?
addition to that, Willem? So in the system, it's indicated if a calculation is verified or not. So it's not a condition. You can also give your information when it's not verified, but you have to indicate if it was verified or not, so that the user knows if the information was verified or not.
Yeah. And then, well, Koen, for the other question, I don't think a thesis is approved by SBTi.
No, there is not an official approval of the thesis data, but I know that several organizations also use it for SBTi calculations in the past.
Thank you for that. Then we've got a question for Julian here. This question is asked by Bertram de Krom. What about the category use of sold products? Is it excluded from Jumbo's scope 3?
Yeah, no, so it's partly included. The greenhouse gas protocol leaves some room for optional inclusions when it comes to products with an indirect energy use. So, for example, cooking pasta or cooking rice you're not obligatory to include that. So that's we excluded that as Jumbo for two reasons. First of all, it's very difficult to measure, of course, the energy use a consumer uses when cooking our products. And if we are able to measure it, how are we going to influence it? So that's the reason why we only focused on product with a direct energy consumption. So, for example, light bulbs, but that's only a very small part of our assortment. We don't sell that much non-food products, especially not those with a plug. So that I think it's 1 or 2% of our total scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, but only the ones that are obligatory from the greenhouse gas protocol.
Thank you very much. And then I think because we're running out of time, a final question for Koen. You already responded to this question in the chat, but it might be nice that you can also share your insights plenary. The question was, Koen, you mentioned one PEF shortcoming is that you can only compare within a product category. Could you say a bit more about that?
Yeah, so there is a general methodology, the product environmental footprint, and then in addition, there are category rules. So category-specific rules that are only valid for that particular product category. So a few weeks ago, for example, we launched the new floriculture category rules. And because those categories are the methods are developed independent of each other, they are also different from each other. And that means that, for example, allocation rules can be different from category to category. In the past, that was also not a problem because the intention was only comparison within a particular product category. But if you want to use the PEF for comparison between product categories, that is an issue. And therefore, within the eco-labeling initiative in the Netherlands, also our advice work to Foundation Earth, we advise to develop a PEF-wise methodology. That was already done by Foundation Earth on a quite high level. And in our initiatives in the Netherlands and in Europe, we want to do that more in detail so that we solve several of the issues of the PEF. On one hand, the inconsistencies between product categories, but also make a standardized methodology available for those product categories that are not covered yet by the category rules that are currently developed. So in that way, it's still very close to the product environmental footprint, but comparisons between product categories are possible.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, that's where we have to end the webinar. A lot of people are already leaving as we have passed 3 o'clock already. I would like to thank you all for participating in this webinar. I would especially like to thank the speakers, Koen, Els, Julian, and Willem. Thank you for your contributions. We hope to hear more of you, of course. And once again, thank you to all the participants for participating today in this webinar and asking questions. If you have any more questions, you can always try to contact me on the email address through which this invitation was sent. So once again, thank you very much.